thank you so much, everybody, for being with us and coming back nombreux, as we would say, in France, in Paris, where I'm based, to listen to a person who is taking on one of the most important roles in the European Union right now. That is Henna Virkkunen. Welcome.
Thank you.
You've been a long-time member of the European Parliament, and last year you took on one of the, I guess, most explosive, if we can say, or delicate, portfolios in Europe, which is you are essentially Europe's tech czar, responsible for technology, security, and also democracy. And, you know, one of the big themes that we have been hearing about in the last couple of days here at the Athens Democracy Forum has obviously been threats to democracy. But what we want to talk about today is the best defense against that. And in particular, one of the big threats to democracy is, of course, the rise of cyber threats. We woke up all this morning to, you know, news of another drone, this time flying around Munich. We know that, you know, what has been happening in Denmark has kind of frightened a lot of people. And so, Henna, maybe I could start by asking you to put things into context for us right now. I guess on a scale of 1 to 10 today, what is the level of risk posed to democracy at this point from things like cybersecurity attacks, disinformation campaigns, supercharged by AI? And how prepared is the EU to essentially defend us against these hybrid threats?
It has been already said quite many times during the last months that Europe is facing the most serious security situation after the Second World War. So, of course, it tells already the seriousness of the situation. But if I should put it from 1 to 10, where we are now, I would say maybe 7. Could be something, so it can, of course, it can become worse. But we see that the European Union and our democracies, they are very much under pressure and under attack every day. So we see that there's full-scale war. Of course, Russians are attacking in Ukraine. But also in the same time we can see that there is sabotage towards our critical infrastructure, there is massive cyber attacks, there's different hybrid operation, GPS jamming, drones lately, and of course disinformation, propaganda spread all over, and interference in the electoral processes, for example. So we see hybrid operations in many different levels, and of course it means that we have to be prepared for many kind of different threats. And democracy is very much, of course, the cornerstone of everything, so building up the resilience of our societies and citizens.
Well, what does that exactly mean? Let's talk about that a little bit more. When you say building up the resilience of our societies to that, what in your role, you know, is your office doing to foster that at a time when all of these threats are developing so rapidly?
We see that our democracies are very much under attack currently, and we are also now gathering really information and evidence and ideas also that what could be done in the European level really to strengthen our democracies. And we are preparing so-called Democracy Shield initiative also from the European Commission side, and it should be published later this year. But I see personally very much that the citizens, of course, they are the core of this, and I see always that good education for our citizens, good literacy, digital skills, that is something what is really needed in nowadays world, that our citizens can be empowered themselves, that they have the tools also critically analyze and think the information what they see. But in the same time, I also see that we have to strengthen also the role of independent free media, because in these times on disinformation and propaganda, it's super important that we have independent quality media, that people have access to information also. And we know that journalism is also very much under pressure because of the economic situation. Many people are not buying newspapers, for example, like they do.
That's something we're painfully aware of.
Yes, and then also advertising is very much on online nowadays, so there's economic difficulties also in our media, and that's why we have to also look this very carefully.
It's such an interesting moment, and last night we heard from Maria Ressa, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the Philippines, who really put herself out there, went to jail, basically, in the face of threats from the president of her country. And, you know, one of the things that struck a lot of people in this room that she said was essentially that disinformation and sort of false information, essentially, spreads something like six times faster than, you know, actual facts, and that this is all being certainly turbocharged by AI, which is, you know, something that's in your portfolio. And it struck me this morning when I was reading the New York Times. A couple of my colleagues had written an interesting story about a new AI that has been developed by OpenAI called Sora. And these are our tech reviewers. And basically, this technology allows you to really quickly kind of create like a film about yourself, putting your face in there. One of them, you know, decided he wanted to be a baseball hero. And it just looked so real, is what they said in the review. And while it was cool, what they concluded was, and I just want to quote from the story, being able to quickly and easily generate video likenesses of people could pour gasoline on disinformation, creating clips of fake events that look so real that they might spur people into real-world action. So that does pose a danger for democracy. But how do you regulate something like fake events like that is just developing so quickly?
Yes, of course, we are facing that in all the technological fields now, that technology is developing very, very fast, and we are also facing new challenges all the time. In the European Union, we want to create technologies that it's trustworthy, that the people can trust the technologies also, because we think that it's most important basis for innovations and investments, that people can trust the technologies they are using. And we have already very strong regulations in the place. So we have Digital Services Act. According to that, the online service providers, they have to all the time assess and mitigate the risks their systems are posing for our societies, for our civic discourse, for people's well-being, for democratic processes. So it's very large obligations they have. And also AI Act is coming now into the force, and there we are also working with these deep fakes now, because our position is that deep fakes, they should be labeled, that the people can clearly see that what is designed by AI and what is like the real content, but that part haven't come into the force yet also in the European Union. So now some of the online service providers, they are taking voluntary actions that you can label this AI content voluntarily, but now it's not a legal obligation yet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I see also that we are all the time facing that kind of challenges, and also we see that there's a lot of online fraud, also different scams, and it's getting more and more difficult also for the people to really identify them because of AI. So that's why the online platforms, they have great responsibility to mitigate this risk also and make sure that they are not spreading disinformation.
Right. And I mean, one of the things that we've seen, you know, with the current American administration was essentially kind of a promise right from the beginning that to loosen regulations. On one of the panels yesterday, I think the concern was expressed about the essential sort of state capture is the term that somebody used of the government, you know, regulatory process by the big AI companies and big technology companies. And of course, one of the things that we've been hearing over in Europe is that, well, if they're deregulating more, we need to do that too, right? Because otherwise, we're going to lose our competitiveness. How do you compete? So, in a world like that, so how are you balancing that huge challenge right now that you know, has been widened basically under this current American presidency?
In the European Union, we see that the technologies and digital world is playing so important role in our economy, in our society, everyday life, that it has to be clear that also those digital platforms and technologies, that they are respecting our rules. So we have same rules offline and online in the European Union. So, for example, illegal products and illegal content, it's also illegal online, and this is very clear obligation under our Digital Services Act. So we want to make sure that we have fair and safe safe, democratic environment also in digital world, and that's why we have a certain set of rules. And these are risk-based rules, so those players who are having a bigger market power, they have more obligations also, because we see that they are posing more risks. And it also with the AI, we see that most of the cases where we are using AI, there is no risk. But then, for example, when you are using AI in hospitals, when AI is operating in our transportation system, it's posing also more risks, and that kind of applications, they have to meet certain standards. They have to be tested before they are entering to the markets, because we want that people can also trust those technologies. So we have a little bit different approach than the USA is having, but also we see that we have also too much bureaucracy in the European Union often, and that's why we are also very committed to simplify also the things. We don't want to have so much red tape and administrative burden, but in the same time, we are very committed to our main principles that we want to make sure that we have fair and safe and democratic environment also in digital era.
Mm-hmm. What, can you give us an example of where sometimes when people think of what's happening in Brussels, they see, sort of like in America, where we see Washington as this kind of like faraway place that's, you know, they're making these regulations that's sort of, you know, far removed from us. But can you talk about an example where what you all are doing has had concrete results? I'm thinking of, for example, the recent election in Romania, where you worked with TikTok, right? Can you talk a little bit about what happened there?
Of course, it tells also the case about Romanian elections, for example, about the power of online platforms nowadays. And we have some clear priorities now also when we are enforcing our Digital Services Act, because it's quite new legislation, and all the online platforms are under the remit of these regulations. So we have certain priorities there. One is really protection of democracy and electoral processes, because we see that there's more and more interference around electoral processes. Then protection of minors is something also super important for us. And then also the online shopping part, because we see that people are buying a lot of things online which are not meeting our standards, which are illegal in the European Union. And also now we have fourth priority, and it's really tackling the scams, because people are losing a lot of money because there is fake ads online and they are going to this. So these are clear priorities.
I personally have lost some money on those.
Yes, 4 billion euros Europeans lost in last year, according to our information, because of these scams. So in Romania, they had presidential elections in last winter, and there was so much suspicious around information manipulation that Romanian authorities, they were cancelling the presidential elections, and they took a new try because they thought that there was foreign interference during the electoral campaign. And especially they were looking that TikTok was spreading a lot of disinformation, and it was manipulated and misused during the campaign. And we started to investigate TikTok and their practices during the electoral campaign, but TikTok also took it very seriously, and they, for example, hired 140 Romanian people, Romanian language people, more to content moderation, for example, and they also activated so-called rapid response system. So all the time when certain content was flagged for them that it's fake or it's disinformation, they were checking it very fast, and if it was the case, they were taking it down. So TikTok, for example, was taking very much efforts during the Romanian elections, and we see that this is a bigger and bigger task now always for us, also in the Commission and all the member states and their electoral authorities, to be prepared for the electoral campaigns together with our online platforms. So nowadays, often when there is elections in the member states, before that, national digital coordinator is organizing that kind of roundtable where the Commission is participating, different authorities, NGOs, journalists, and the online platforms, and they are looking at what kind of risks there could be around these elections in that country, and then they are checking if the online platforms like X, TikTok, Meta, if they have all the practices in the place, and they have been also running that kind of stress test together with them. They they have been testing different scenarios, and they have looked how the online platforms are reacting to that, to make sure that they are not misused or manipulated, because we know that online platforms, they are very important channels nowadays during the electoral campaigns. So often the citizens, they got their information via online about the political parties, about different politicians and their ideas, and these are also a very important channel for political parties and politicians to reach the audience, and that's why we have to have a very good balance there, that they are not misused and they are transparent also with their actions. And in Moldova, we had also now a great task, because Moldova is not part of European Union, and we know that they were under very hard pressure from Russian side now in last weekend when they had elections. So we were very much supporting also Moldovan authorities and the online platforms. They were also committed to that work, so they were really trying to do, they were doing their part also there. Moldova was also under massive cyber attacks, so our cybersecurity office, ENISA, which is based here in Athens, they were supporting very much Romanian authorities with the cyber attacks, for example. So that is the situation where we are now often during the electoral campaign, so different hybrid operations, and we know that this is very sensitive area, because elections, they are, of course, core of our democracy. And if the people, if they start to have doubts that do we have fair and free elections, of course, this is destabilizing our societies very much. And that's why the integrity of our elections is really top priority for us.
I mean, it certainly is. As you know, for example, with respect to Moldova, Russia, perhaps not surprisingly, but nonetheless did push back and say it was that was EU election interference in a way. And you might remember several months ago when President Trump took office, when Elon Musk accused the European Union of essentially censoring what he considered, to be free speech. And, I mean, one of the questions that has come up here is, what exactly is it that constitutes free speech, particularly on these platforms? In the United States, in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we've seen more people who were sympathetic to him, sort of rallying to this cry that, our voices need to be heard too. Why is our position any less valid than the liberal position? So how are you facing that type of challenge?
For us, freedom of speech is one of the very fundamental values of European Union, and also in our Digital Services Act, it's very strongly protected. So we are not, there's often misunderstanding also about our digital rules, because we are not regulating the content. So we are regulating that the online platforms, they have to have systems in place that how they are themselves assessing and mitigating the risks. And the clear line is that illegal content is also illegal online. So illegal hate speech, for example, they have to take it down, so because it's illegal. So there's also limits. So everything is not under freedom of speech, because your own freedom of speech is not going over other people's rights. Other people, they have also rights. So there's limitation also in the freedom of speech. For example, when it comes to hate speech, that what kind of information you can spread online or offline about the other people. And there's clear court cases, of course, in the European Union, and there's clear legislation also in each country that where are the limits on hate speech, for example. So this is the line that illegal content, illegal products, they have to be taken down. But we have also very strong safeguards in our Digital Service Act, because in the same time when we were putting more obligations for online platforms, we were also empowering more citizens, because we know that online platforms, they are nowadays a very important part of our civic discourse, and they are like public spaces, and that's why people has also right there. So nowadays in the European Union, if your content or your account, if it's blocked or your content is taken down, the online platform has to report you about it, that why they did it, and you have possibility to challenge this decision. And the Europeans, they have been challenging these decisions also, and about 70% of the cases, online platform, they have put the content back or put the account back. Now, so we have also strengthened the role of the users now that online platforms, they can't do their own decisions without informing you and also without giving the possibility for you to challenge this decision. It's also interesting to see that because now we have been creating also more transparency for online platforms. Nowadays, online platforms, they have to always report if they are taking content down, and they have to report the reasons. So we have public database on that in the European Union, and everybody can see. And of course, there has been millions and tens of millions cases when they are taking content down. But 99% of the cases, when the online platforms like Meta or X or TikTok is taking content down, it's based to their own terms and conditions. So 99% of the cases, it has been something what is against their own rules, own terms and conditions. And only less than 1% has been that the national trusted flaggers has been flagging something that it's illegal, and only 0.001% has been the cases that really national authority has made an order that something is illegal and has to be taken down. Because this is often the fear that now the national authorities are somehow going and saying that you have to take something down or so on. No, it's the online platforms who are having the full responsibility, and they are acting with their own power there. And we see that most of the cases, something is against their own terms and conditions.
We're going to have several minutes for questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please get your hands ready and raise your hand so that a microphone can be brought to you. But before I turn to the audience, I did want to ask you, circle back to what we opened up with, which is, you know, sort of, we're seeing just this multitude of headlines about, you know, things like drones and whatnot flying into Danish airspace, and, you know, you're from Finland, so you grew up essentially kind of already with, you know, this sense of sort of a country that's prepared for anything. But other places in the European Union feel farther removed, and my colleague had an interesting story yesterday in the Times about how all these Danish people are kind of like stocking up on tinned sardines and buying, you know, ready-to-eat meals, you know, and things like that, because they're pretty freaked out to see drones flying around. And so this feeling that this war that, you know, had been happening farther away, right, on the Ukraine border, is actually fairly close to home. So in your role, what, you know, how big, not only how big of a challenge is that for you to deal with, but how can you assure, I guess, the European public that the EU has got this?
I think it's important to be prepared, of course, all the time, and it's also among our citizens that we have to prepare for different scenarios and situations, but of course member states are protecting our areas, and we are working as the European Commission, we are working very closely with our member states and with NATO on this topic, but we see that there is different kind of hybrid operations, and of course the idea is behind these hostile actors who are attacking against our societies, they are trying to destabilize and create that kind of untrust and fear in our society. So it's important that we are keeping calm and we are sticking together here, and we are acting decisively together. Of course, drones is something that it's now a new element here, but we have to also be prepared for that, and we are all the time creating, of course, anti-drone capacity also in the European Union. Also, cyber attacks is something that it doesn't matter where you are located in the European Union or outside also. And nowadays we see that the cyber attacks also, they are getting more and more sophisticated because of AI. So all the vulnerabilities, they are used very fast. And the AI or the cyber attacks, they are coming in very big waves also to different sectors. So this is scary also that all the member states has to be very well prepared. And it can also happen, for example, if cyber attack is cutting our banking system, cutting our electricity, for example, water or energy. So we have to be also prepared, of course, for different kind of scenarios. And that's why in the European Union we are also working with the preparedness. So we published a preparedness strategy during the spring, and now we are working with member states to be sure also that everybody is prepared for different kind of situation what we can have.
I found it interesting that the European Central Bank issued a statement about a week ago suggesting that everybody should have cash on hand, even as the banking system has moved fully electronic and central banks are trying to create, their own electronic currency. Anyway, let's turn it to the audience for questions. It's a little bit hard to see because of the light, so I do see a hand raised here, 2 hands raised there. If we could send the microphone over. And please keep your questions succinct. We don't have time for statements because Henna needs to leave for the airport right after this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melina. I have one question. Why does support for Russia in the conflict with Ukraine remain strong despite international sanctions and domestic economic difficulties? Thank you.
Why does support for Russia remain strong despite the invasion of Ukraine? I'm sorry, was that the question? Yes?
Yes, we often see it, of course, in the European Union that our different member states, they have different geographical location, different history and culture, and that's why often the member states, they don't see the threats in similar ways. So different member states, also in the European Union, they see, of course, different threats in their front line. And those countries which are neighbors for Russia, of course, they are frontline countries in this war. And they see, of course, the situation that it's much more alarming. Maybe some other countries don't see it so serious. But according to this background, I think the European Union has been historically united, now supporting Ukraine and sanctioning Russia, because we have already approved 19 sanction packages, even that they have been often difficult for some member states, but we have been succeeding. And always all the member states have to agree when we are putting sanctions. But it's true that globally also there is differences of the position of different countries, but we should clearly see that Russia is, of course, acting against all international rules when they are attacking the sovereign country and killing people there. So Ukraine has, of course, full right to their own territory, to their own independence, and they have the freedom to choose their freedom themselves. And Russia is very clearly, of course, violating that, and it has to be punished and sanctioned.
Vice President Virkkunen, that is Stefan Sindela, European Capital of Democracy. Thank you for all those insights and for taking swift action on those important issues. You're also responsible for technological sovereignty, right? And I wondered how the Commission wants to do this, because given our high dependencies on digital infrastructure and communication infrastructure, social media, on China, the US, will you do another Airbus exercise where we actually were successful in creating a European player? Or what are the thoughts? Would you enable the private sector to create those technological platforms? Could you give us any indication on what the ideas here are, maybe? Thank you.
That is, of course, a very key question for us, because we see nowadays that global competition on technological capacities, it's very hard nowadays. So, because those countries who has the technological capacity, they have the economic power, they have the power in security field as well. So these are very much interlinked, technology, security, and democracy as well. And that's why for European Union, it's very important to build up our own capacity in critical sectors in technologies. And we have identified certain critical sectors where we have to have competent ourselves in the future. So AI is one of those, and now we are investing heavily together with our member states to computing infrastructure, because it's a clear obstacle for many startups and researchers in the European Union that they don't have access to computing capacity. And that's why we have created 13 AI factories around European Union together with member states to have computing power and give this computing power and access to computing power to startups and to researchers, because we have very strong research in the European Union. We have thousands of startups who are working to create AI, and that's why it's very important. On next week, we will also adopt apply AI strategy, and there we have identified the strong European strategic sectors where we are supporting the uptake of AI. So we see that this is one of the critical technologies. Next will be now quantum technologies. This is something that Europe is very strong. So we have the biggest amount of scientific publications in quantum, and we are historically very strong in research and science. And now we have to make sure that these innovations are entering to the markets also, because we see that quantum is really future technology. Of course, semiconductors also super important, and cybersecurity technology. So we are identifying those technologies where we have to have our own capacity, but in the same time, it doesn't mean that we are planning to do everything by our own in the future, isolated. We don't think that anyone can be competitive alone, so we need partners also globally, and we are working very closely with for example, with Japan, with Korea, Singapore, with Canada on these topics.
Okay, great. I did promise this gentleman one very last question. If you could make it lightning fast and we could do it in 1 minute.
Hi, my name is Erdem, author of The Next Democracy. My question is that given all the rise of far right in Europe, is democratic innovation part of your agenda? And in this forum we've discussed deliberation, citizen deliberation, and also OECD has published agile democracy or data-driven decision-making is actually a way to build trust. What do you say about improving the state of European policy-making processes and institutions? Are you working on innovating in that space?
That is, of course, a very like a cornerstone of the European Union. That European Union is based on that democratic nations, democratic countries came together, and democracy is not anything that we can take granted. And we see that it's all the time under attack, and we have to be sure that we are educating and empowering citizens who can be playing their important part in democracies. Of course, I'm also very worried, for example, that many young people are maybe not so much involved to our decision-making processes, and that is something we have to work very much on. And also, I said also about the role of media, for example. Of course, elections, that how big part of our citizens are also voting in the elections. These are very cornerstones, of course, of our societies and future. And I think it's important every day to work in local level, regional, national, and European level to make sure that we have strong democracy in the future.
Well, thank you for that. And it's really one of the great things about this forum is that so many people who have come here, including a lot of young people, are involved in doing exactly that. So thank you very much for lending your voice to the Democracy Forum. And we will, end it here so that we can let you go. And I'll invite Kim on up to start the next panel. Thank you all.
Thank you.